Alrighty, welcome everybody to lesson 78 of Sapanta's English and Writing Masterclass. I think it's pivotal that we understand, right? And let me type it here. How to actually thoroughly articulate ourselves, right? Um, and I'll even make it a question. How do we actually thoroughly articulate ourselves, right? I think we struggle with it, and a lot of the times it comes down to a few things, right? One, a lack of vocabulary. So, you know, not having a broad enough vocabulary means you won't have the words to use to articulate yourself. So, an incomplete toolbox, right? Does that make sense? Right? Hold on. There we go. Right. So you have an incomplete toolbox, right? In others, and from other perspectives, like maybe you haven't had enough exposure, right, to high level articulation and media, or haven't focused on what it actually means to be a high level communicator, right? That's also another reality, right? How do we address the above, right? Well, first, I think I really want us to ask, what actually is articulation? So let's put it this way, right? So articulate, to be articulate. So think about it like this, right? Any thought that comes into your head goes into a processor that allows you to then express that thought onto paper or in writing. Okay, does that make sense? If you fail to express that thought, right, that means that, again, people will not only misunderstand, not only misunderstand you, but then as a result, might misinterpret your prerogative and your opinions and your perspective. But that could be damaging, and that would make you a poor communicator. And I think the key here is, right? The key here is to realize communicating with people means, communicating with people well means you need to give them very little room for ambiguity, right? You need to give them very little room to be confused or to feel like your words are unclear in some way, shape, or form. And I think it's pivotal, right? Pivotal to be able to actually express yourself adequately, because if you don't, you will lose job opportunities at interviews. You will, if you've got an interview to get into medical school, it won't go very well, right? So that idea of articulation, pivotal, so pivotal, right? So what is an articulated idea, right? What is an articulated idea? Well, an articulated idea, very much so, right? An articulated idea is one that is very well thought through. It is one that moves logically from premise to expansion to implication. And you know me, I love these little three steps, right? From idea to the actual depiction of it to the implications of it. So idea, proof, impact, right? Or visualization, explanation, interpretation. Communication is a set of a combination of A, B, C, one, two, three. It's the thought comes into your head, then the thought becomes language that you express, and then it becomes people that interpret your language. Every single step of that is pivotal. Do we understand? Right? Every single step of that is pivotal. Communication is merely a three-step process. So a lot of you are really good at thinking the right things. Not that many of, students or people are very good at expressing those things. And then people are even worse at then interpreting those things. Because it's really easy for thoughts to come into our head, but we're not very good at actually processing, synthesizing, packaging, preparing, and then exerting those thoughts as well articulated responses. Does that make sense? Okay. So An articulated idea is one that is very well thought through, moves logically from premise to expansion, and then as an extension to that, to implication. And that kind of, hand in hand with idea, proof to impact, or visualization, actualization, interpretation, right? So again, when we look at these ideas, we must account for the fact that communication is a set of three steps. It is a process. It is how do I allow myself so so that my communication has no noise. Guys, when I teach you, how often do I use like, so like, to be honest, like, kind of like, so. I don't use discourse particles. If I'm going to use discourse particles, I just pause. I don't say, and yeah, so then this, and to have a clear direction, and move logically, and you'd be a fucking terrible communicator if you said between each idea. Terrible. If you said kind of like so, kind of like, you sound stupid. You sound intolerable. I was watching a revision lecture for pediatric surgery medical conditions on the plane, and the lecturer, she just wouldn't restrain herself from shunting the phrase in between every single idea, and I hated that lecture. I thought, God, she sounds so anti-intellectual surrounding the topic that she is meant to be the expert of. So in a way, I'm always thinking five sentences ahead, so that when I get to this sentence as I'm speaking, I'm already thinking of the next sentence, such that when I get there, I'm not in a position to say, and buffer and buy myself time and have to hedge. That is the art of actually pacing your communication. You need to start actively thinking, okay, what are all the things that I'm actually going to say, right? I'll tell you this, right? I'll tell you this. I was in India for about 18 days, 18, 19 days, right? And I'll put it this way. I was working at, you know, a multi-hundred-million-dollar company, living next to a CEO that's basically a billionaire, and they have 130 employees, of which I was brought into there to give them something called global perspective. Because the issue in an Indian company is this. When they make a product, it cannot feel like it is made in India. Because if it does, it won't do well in the world. And every product that they made was good, but it felt like it was made in India. So how do they elevate from that? By actually changing perspective. So I talked to 50 employees out of 130. I've figured out every little thing that's wrong with how that company runs. And I made sure they knew this is terrible. Don't run it this way. Don't run it that way. Why are you doing this? Why are you doing it that way? I spoke to the CEO. I spoke to him very honestly. And every night I would argue with him. This is horrendous. This way of doing this is terrible. And I just turned 21, but I was there on the premise that at the age of 18, I built a certain business that did well. And I have 30 something people working for me. And I've been to all these countries and speak a few different languages. So I'm an asset here because I'm articulate and I know how to mobilize an army of workers, right? Now, after 7 days, right, of being there, 12 of them have messaged me asking me if they can work for me or if they can work with me in some way. So they started giving me pitches for me to invest. So they, for example, they'll want 80 grand. They want 80 grand from me so that two of them can have a year and a half's worth of salary each. And, they're two really talented engineers that have built a certain software, and I take 10% of their company. I saw about six of these presentations, five of which were okay, But the actual delivery of that presentation made me feel like they weren't terribly knowledgeable in the craft of the tech that they are trying to build to compete with the world. Except two guys who were so sharp, so passionate. They didn't use a single filler, a single discourse particle, explained the tech in layman's terms as if I was a baby, and gave me no ambiguity, as if I learnt the technology that they had spent a year building in 30 minutes. And English was their second language. Alongside them already being great guys and working really hard, and me making friends with them, and me already being on board, the ceiling factor was the fact that they could teach me, a guy who's a medical student, linguistics teacher, um, you know, semi-documentary filmer, traveler. I'm not a technical coder. I'm not a programmer. I'm not that guy. But they taught me in 30 minutes what their product was beyond what any of the other five presentations achieved. I'm in, right? So they got me. They already got me. Now I want to work with them because they were articulate. Okay? So when I say you need to think 5 sentences ahead, I don't even mean five. I just mean at least the next sentence should be coming into your head as you're finishing the current sentence. As I finished the previous sentence, as I came into my head because my next sentence was as I. Because, and because came into my head just then, right before I finished that sentence. So I'm constantly scheming the next sentence I'm going to write and say. And that's powerful in an essay because if you're not well articulated, when you write an essay, your ideas will not connect to one another because you're going to miss ideas. You're going to have jagged thoughts. You're going to get to the end of a sentence and then start a new thought because you don't have continuity because you haven't planned the next sentence. You haven't planned your flow. Establishing that cohesion requires a strong vocabulary and conviction in how you think, what you see, and how you write. Does that make sense? And that's why I think it's pivotal that every single one of you does debating and forces yourself to be under pressure, to think fast when people are putting the fire to you in an argument and a debate, so that you think quick and you put your words together in a way that protect yourself and at the same time bring an offensive. Articulation is pivotal in life. You could be a genius, but if you cannot articulate your ideas, you will never make it. You could never make it. Seriously, seriously. I had, when I went to India in September, I went to Bangalore for a conference. I was invited to that conference because I took a risk and went to Texas in August to speak to people that I knew were successful. And all I had was 2 days and about 4 hours to speak to them in a way that would convince them subconsciously that I could contribute, that I was a sharp mind, a hard worker, young, successful, capable, with perspective that they would want from me. That brought me to India. I had one lunch with the next guys. That one lunch invited me to a wedding and back to the company. And when I went to that company, I was so honest and I gave them everything I knew in that 7 days. I didn't hide anything, I didn't gatekeep anything, because if you give them everything you know, they will want more of you, right? So now they want me to implement all the things that I taught them. And they want me to they want to give me an equity stake and put me onto a project, and they're willing to work with me. Hybrid, part-time, they know I'm a medical student. They know I don't need them. And that's very important because when your pie of life is so full, it does not matter if they kick me out of medical school. What does that change for me? I will never be brought down because I have so many other things that I can do that I have built for myself. And I have such faith in my communication and in the hard work that I've done, such that I have I have 9 lives. And how did I establish that? By becoming a strong communicator. In year 11, I failed methods in chemistry. I failed methods in chemistry in year 11. I failed. I got 11% on methods and 28% on my chemistry exam in year 11 at Baldwin High School. I got suspended 3 times once in year 8, once in year 10, once in year 12. I had to get my act together. I had to. I had to become a strong communicator. The pressure that I was under, in a way, built me, but I also understood, hold on a second, it was the 3rd of March, or at least the 1st of March, and I was playing around with crypto and investing, and I suddenly, when I was 16, I went from $40 to 90 something thousand. And I was in year 11 going to school with all the boys, and we were all doing crypto, and our group account had $1 million, and we were 16 in 2021, 2020, 2021. Then the market crashes. One of my friends lost 400 grand. I lost about 80 grand. Not much left. And I spoke to my brother-in-law at a lunch. And he told me, Sapanta, if you do medicine and your worst case is that you become a doctor, everything else that you do will allow you to take the right risks, spread your wings the right way, and feel the right level of freedom to really do everything you need to do. Because you know that if everything goes wrong, you'll be a doctor. And if you build something for yourself, then if everything goes wrong and you can't be a doctor, then you have so much else going for you, right? But all of this came from my communication, right? So learn to be articulate, learn to get people on your side, learn to make people understand what you are capable of, not in an arrogant way, but in like a, that's really fair. But if you looked at it this way, maybe that's a nuanced perspective, or know things about the world. Because when I'm at this lunch and I'm speaking to people from a different country, and I know what language they speak in a specific state of a specific country that no one else that they've met from Australia would ever know, let alone a 21-year-old. Of course they're going to be impressed. Like, wow, this kid's done his reading. It matters. And because I'd done this type of reading, by the time I got to year 12, English became really easy. Even chemistry became easier. Even maths became easier. I went from failing these subjects to either becoming the like individual top ranked highest section B scorer in English language of all time in Victoria, or getting a scaled 45 in chemistry, right? And so on and so on and so on, right? The more you know about the world, the easier year 12 becomes. The more you know about the world, the more articulate you become. The higher your vocabulary, the better you can actually describe all of these ideas and concepts that you have worked hard to accumulate about the world. And I never run with I make sure that I bow to someone who I view as ambitious and admirable. Everybody that goes to India for business treats these people like shit. They abuse them, right? They don't take them seriously. They don't view them as human beings. Not even the people that owned this company, right? So I was a contrast to that. Everybody's like, don't do this, don't make that investment, don't. No, well, because I have this now, I have this track record of every decision I have made has been the right decision. Leaving Australia without telling my parents for me was the right decision. If I hadn't have, I wouldn't have met X, Y, and Z. I know what Melbourne is. It's predictable. I'm there for 9 months of the year. At least for 3 months, let me be in places that teach me something that I would have never otherwise grasped. Now that I've built something for myself to do that, right? And what does that do? It forces me to talk to people who don't even speak my language. It forces me to talk to people and communicate to them in ways that has to navigate different cultural perspectives. People that are so deeply ingrained in religion, I need to sit there and have a secular conversation with. And Sapanta, how do you even, what do you exactly? But that's the type of thing that you learn when you actually force yourself to be articulate. You must talk secularly to he who is religious, right? You must talk secularly to he who is theocratically conservative and find a middle ground there. You must talk authoritatively to he who is democratic and democratically to he who is, you know, in a state of mind where someone might prefer a dictatorship. You need to play the polar opposites of everyone to bring them to a middle ground. No matter where you are, play the devil's advocate, understand the middle ground, appeal to what they need. At all times, don't try to challenge without reason. Acknowledge why people feel the way that they do, and then give them an alternative perspective and suggest a middle ground and make them feel like you've just added a new perspective that they didn't know about. Bring up a precedent. Well, how does the legal field work? When we pursue law, when we pursue the legal field, in civil law, a lot of the cases that you pursue are based on precedent. What does that mean? That means if you're a lawyer fighting a civil case, you have to use the outcomes of old cases to justify new cases. So you might say, aha, your land dispute is over this idea. 10 years ago, there was a similar land dispute in which the judge ruled this, and we learnt this about our legal system and constitution because the judge ruled this, right? It's the same in real life. Everything that you describe, the more knowledge that you have, the more historical events that you know, the more you can talk based on precedent. Which is why I'm obsessed with you guys understanding predictive history, right? Which is why I'm obsessed with you guys understanding predictive history, right? And I'll just put this link in chat again, right? Does that make sense? Right? So I'm begging you to become more aware if you want to be more successful, right? These, like, I can give you step by steps in Teal and TPQCL and topic sentence this and that. My job should be to broaden your minds because the more you know about the world, the less significant year 12 will be. English and English language is easier when you have so much grasp on how the world works because the ideas of prejudice, racism, geopolitics, they become ideas that you can easily and quickly digest. And the other really important thing is you must listen to everybody, listen to their perspectives. I'll be honest, I don't think my own grandfather is the most aware and historically accurate person. But I listen to his perspective and I use it as a comparative data point. All of this is a reference point. It's a comparative data point for me. I'll be on the plane and I'll know that the guy next to me might have some idea regarding what, his perspective of the world. And maybe I won't agree, but I'll listen to him. And I'll think, why does he actually think the way that he does? Because everything that all of you think, all these ideas that come in and out, a lot of that is grounded in your childhood context, right? It's not grounded in unbiased, neutral research. A lot of diasporic members of the Persian community are convinced that it's America's fault that the revolution of 1979 happened. No. When you actually do your research, you realize it was a people's revolution. The people wanted a revolution, and a revolution was necessary to escape the Shah pre-1978. Now, that doesn't mean they support today's revolution if they admit that. But there is so much cognitive bias and resentment and emotions that they bury themselves under. But to be a trailblazer, you have to separate yourself from that. And every single person in this class is an immigrant or the child of an immigrant. Every single one of us, Viana to Jazz, Taran, Tabassum, Raya, Jerome, Ario, Arvin, Ali, Alana, myself, every student I've ever had has been an immigrant or the child of an immigrant. So these are ideas that we resonate with, right? Whether you're Korean and your parents have this resentment towards American imperialism, the fact that South Korea can be what it is because it's a proxy military base for the United States, right? Or whether you're Indian and there are still the remnants of British colonialism and globalism that force South Indians to farm tea, right? Migration isn't always the key to happiness either, right? You can't expect to migrate and do nothing and be prosperous. A flower can bloom where it's planted, but it's about within, right? People think if they migrate, they all their kids will be like me or us. They don't understand. There's so many migrants whose kids become addicted to drugs, who join gangs, who do X, Y, and Z. Right? There's gaps in perception. There's gaps in you have to escape the cultural shackles. You have to escape this idea of your ethnic parents telling you to keep this a secret and keep that a secret. And if this person finds out this, then this person is going to find out this. And oh no, now let me call my mum across the world and have this argument, escape all of this. Not, what are we doing? You guys are in a unique position where your parents are empowering you and they themselves are stuck in the past, right? these insecurities that you guys have, that you get from your parents, that you have to compare yourselves to the next cousin or to the next family friend or to the next this, or this girl got this score at this school, and this is that MLC, this PLC, that Xavier College, that Trinity. What are we doing, man? Energy within, right? But you're put in these positions to compete with one another. That is toxic. That is from that survival mindset of immigration that you guys don't need to subscribe to, right? You focus within and you follow, you create your own gravity. You don't play to the drum or ride the wave of these immigrant insecurities and worries, right? Conviction is the most important thing. Not do not fold to these standards, right? And if you understand that, then you become an idiosyncratic thinker, right? I was in the car with the CEO of that company, and you know what he told me? The day before, I'd gone into a board meeting, and I told the owners and the founders and the top guys at the company that their product feels like the worst forceful ejaculation ever, and I fucking hate it. And I looked them straight in the eyes. Why? Because I'm immune to that. Because I've created a life for myself where with or without them, I'm successful. Don't need anyone financially. I carry my parents financially. I carry my family in Iran financially. It's all on my back. And that's okay. You could argue it's unfair that I've been dealt that hand, but I've been dealt that hand and I'm choosing to take on board this responsibility because I feel like it gives me a certain ambition, right? We were in the car and he told me, Sapanta, you remind me of Sam. I said, Sam who? He's like, my mentor when I was in San Francisco was Sam Altman. And I'm like, Sam Altman, like the CEO of OpenAI. He told me that I remind him of this guy. He said there's a certain fearless nature in my eye that reminds me of this guy. So, what? Right? So that, me separating from all this cultural trauma, me honing in on what I'm really passionate about, me choosing to be worldly aware and do my own research and be neutrally unbiased and talk to everybody. Even when I travel with my friends, sometimes I might frustrate them in the sense that I want to talk to everyone. I'm there to talk to people. I love the human condition. I love emotionally understanding every single one of you guys. You give me life. You give me a pulse on what it means to be human when I have the privilege of teaching, budding minds like you guys. I want to have a profound impact on every single one of you. That's my goal. That's my passion, right? Because if I can do that, then English is a second priority. Today's ATAR day. I've got 50 messages in my phone from like 50 messages of students getting Raw 46, Raw 48, Raw 45, Raw 45, Raw 44, Raw 44, Raw 45. But you know what all of them say? They say thank you for actually opening my mind about the world and allowing me to see the world differently through the visor of the sociology that you taught me. Like the idea that you guys are not taught about Maslow's hierarchy or human need, understanding these things will improve your articulation. It's like, yes, we can constantly talk about incorporating this quote and that quote, and I'm about to upload a YouTube video for you guys about embedding quotes and sure, but what does articulation come down to? Tell me. So think about it, right? You must communicate in a way that nobody can ever misunderstand. Understand what you are discussing. Be the arbiter of what you're communicating. Do you guys are you guys listening? Do you understand? Do you guys appreciate this type of conversation? Or in your head is it like, man, I want to get out of this class. Can this guy just get to it? Like, and if you feel that way, that's fine. Tell me so that I know. And that's okay, right? But again, I'm telling you, like, um, Alana's just put in chat, I just got a 46 in BizMan, and I think these classes enabled me to be driven to find new ways to articulate myself, which helped me get a 46 in BizMan, right? Um, you actually, and Ali said it's better because I can actually relate what we're learning to the real world. Yes, because when I talk about these things, I don't care about English. I don't give a fuck about English. I don't care about your English score because I know your English score will be good if you are aware about what happens in the real world. Because Noah Trevor's Born a Crime or Pride and Prejudice's trials and tribulations of stoicism and trauma will be easier to understand if I actually teach you what it means to be traumatized. But you're not taught that way because you're taught to read a book and find your own feet without someone there as a trailblazer to tell you, hey, This is how the world works. This is how people feel. And if you're not emotionally aware, psychologically aware, and empathetic about every little thing that happens in the periphery of your life every single day, you will fail to form meaningful commentary. The most mature kids do the best on the UCAT, do the best on English, do the best on year 12. It's always the kids that don't compare themselves to anyone, that only compare themselves to themselves, that understand what their values are. I'll tell you what my values are. I love working in a team. I love working in the right team. I love working with people that I love working with, right? A lot of you have never been in a scenario where you've actually had the right team. So what you think is, God, I hate working in a team because you've never had the right team. But until you work with the right team, you'll never know. So when you do the 16 personality test on Myers-Briggs, when it comes to I enjoy working in a team, you're going to press disagree. But you're wrong, right? You're probably wrong because you're cognitively biased. You've had one selective experience that's defined the rest of it. But if I allow you to be more mature, you actually step back. And when you see that question, if you're more profound as a student, you think, actually, I don't think I've ever worked in the right team for me, but I think it would be fantastic if I had the right team. And that's the gap between an okay thinker and an intellect. To say, hold on, I've experienced all of this, but I haven't experienced everything. The realist sign of intelligence is that of a human being that can simulate the real world and do it accurately. So in my head, I can simulate that if I say this sentence to my grandmother, I know how she'd feel. That's step one. If you're more intelligent, you can go, I know how she'd respond. I know what she'd think to herself. I know what she would say to others. And if you're really, really intelligent, you'd say, actually, I know what then others in her life would respond to her, and then what she would respond to them, and how that would make them feel. And it's like, how far out can you follow that chain reaction? Do you guys understand what I'm saying? This idea of simulating the real world? Have you ever thought about that? Like, guys, tell me, please. Like, do you understand what I'm saying? Like, think about you saying a sentence to your grandma or someone in your family or to your uncle. Can you predict what he would respond to you? Practice that skill. Doesn't take up time, but at least I grasp, okay, I shouldn't say that because if I say that to her, she's going to say this, she's going to think this, she'll feel this, she'll say this to others, and the people in her life that I know will respond like this, to which that'll make her feel this way and make them feel that way. That is intelligence. That is the truest form of intelligence. That is the ability to fruitfully navigate the world. Do we understand? Does that make sense, guys? Give me some, like, are we actually on the same page? Can you practice that? Can everybody practice that skill? Start fucking simulating the real world so that you can actually predict real world outcomes. And then if you can predict real world outcomes, of course you can be successful because then you can predict what someone's going to say, what they're going to think, how the world's going to turn out, who feels what, and why they feel that way. That real world intellectual stimulation is what actually gets you to that point. Does that make sense? Are we on the same page? Right? Alana, Ali, Arvin, Aryo, Jerome, are we there? Are we listening? Raya, Tarasum, Taranum, Tajaz, Viviana, are we there? So start actually simulating the real world. When you go to university, those who don't simulate the real world will always be less successful. They're the duds who don't think, who sit quietly, who don't care to think, who don't pursue, who don't actually calculate what's going to happen around them. And there is a problem with overthinking and over intellectualizing. You must practice pragmatism as well at the same time. Okay? And if you don't have an understanding of the person you converse with, you have to practice actually gaining an understanding of the person that you are conversing with. So you ask them polarizing questions. You learn things about different countries. So when they say they're from Nigeria, you can go, which tribe are you from? The Yorubas, the Igbos, or the Hausas? And I know that the Hausas are the Muslims, who are the majority population, who have all the political control, but they're actually the poorest group, and they're persecuted. And they've always been facing socioeconomic hardship because they're in the north, they don't have access to the oil. But the Christians that are the Igbo and the Yorubas have all the oil. But they're minorities that are arguably being genocided and killed by the houses now that the houses have political power. And how does that make you feel? How does it make your parents feel? And do you even know anything about that? And if you do, how did you learn about that? And where did you read that, sir? Right? And how does that, do you think there's a future for that? Is there a way out? And bang, I've already learned so much about them. The way that they seek information, the people that they're around to have grasped that information. If they're appreciative of that style of information, if they're pragmatic enough to separate themselves from the emotionality of that and think pragmatically about solutions, if they're selfish enough to not care, knowledge matters. Knowledge matters so much, right? Raya, are we there? Do we understand? Are you guys listening to me? Right? Like, do you guys, like, okay, any knowledge matters. The more knowledge you have, the better, right? There's no world flag of a UN certified nation you could show me that I wouldn't know the country of. And I'd probably know a fact about it too, right? I know that Benin has a lot of malaria death. I know that Togo provides basic goods and necessities to its population. I know that the Taliban's majority are Pashtun people that are actually the minority of the overall population. Why? Because I have these conversations. And I know that with the Taliban, the roads of Afghanistan are safer than ever at the cost of women's rights. But at the same time, the Tajiks and the Uzbeks and the Hazaras are actually at risk because the Taliban say, Uzbek but Uzbekistan, take the Uzbeks to Uzbekistan, Tajik but Tajikistan, take the Tajiks to Tajikistan, and Hazaras to Gulistan, and the Hazaras should go to hell. And how do I actually learn this information? By talking to everyone. I talk to everyone. I ask everyone uncomfortable questions. Tomorrow, when I see my mum's uncle, I'm going to ask him, why is your family dysfunctional? What about it makes you guys dysfunctional? What about your family draws you guys to constantly living in comparison? What about your family makes you fall into this trap of social pressure? Was it your upbringing? Was it that you developed through globalism too fast? Is it tough that in 2 generations you went from riding a donkey to school to living in a metropolitan city and flying planes? Is that something that you guys have had difficulty grasping? Is that why you're still stuck? I ask people uncomfortable questions in a kind manner. I ask them, look, I know this might be sensitive, but what draws you to religion? And why is that important to you? Right? Etc. I ask people questions. I learn about their world. I actually look into their eyes. I feel what they feel. Same goes when you're answering a question on Pride and Prejudice or Born a Crime by Trevor Noah. Because if then you know what Trevor Noah felt, wow, now you can write about what he felt. And you'll probably write a better essay than a kid who memorized how Trevor Noah felt. Because you actually understand how he felt. Because you put yourself into his shoes. Does that make sense? Is there a style of question that you feel harnesses the most information? Lots of questions, as long as they're genuinely curious. And slowly you will accumulate this unbeatable bank of knowledge. I was with my brother-in-law standing in South Yarra and I saw an Indian security guard who was from the state of Telangana, and I knew that he spoke Telugu, and I knew that Telangana split from Andhra Pradesh recently. Now that's two different states in India. But I know that they consider themselves Southees, and I know about their film industry, right? And I know that in the state of Bihar in India, they steal bridges overnight and they all have guns. And if you have a government job, they'll arrest you and force you to marry their daughter. But that's a running joke. I know that in Jharkhand, in another state of India, when they pour cement, people will go out and bucket it up because they don't have cement to put in their own homes. I know the situation in Bangladesh as well as I know the situation in Japan politically, as well as South Korea, as well as North Korea, as well as. Now, it depends what you want in life, but at the very least, if you do this, you will live a more fulfilling, honest, self-aware life. To know more is powerful, right? Because you build an identity around knowledge, not around your appearance or your job. You build an identity around knowledge. I don't care if people know that I'm a medical student or not. This does not matter. I care that they feel like I pay attention to them with genuine care, empathy, right? And attention. Yeah, sure, Ali, right? Beautiful. So now let's go to that back to articulation and let's see if you guys can now kind of grasp even more. Okay? So, step one, you have an idea. Two, you have a clarification. Three, you might have evidence. Four, you might have an implication. What does all this actually look like? So when you have an idea, I might say this. Shakespeare presents self-deception, okay, as the engine that accelerates Macbeth's downfall. Okay. At the same time, you might say, in clarification, this is shown not through singular choices, but through a pattern of Macbeth constructing illusions about his own invincibility. Third of all, you might say the phrase, none of woman shall be, none of woman born shall harm Macbeth. Right? Reveals how Macbeth fixates on literal interpretations, ignoring metaphor and intention. Right? And then to finish that off, I might say what? Shakespeare suggests Shakespeare suggests that when individuals manipulate language, when individuals manipulate language to soothe their fears, they become architects of their own destruction. Now, when you read this, do you guys feel that you grasp it more? Tell me in chat. When you read this set of four sentences, I want everyone to talk to me, please. Viana, Tajaz, Taranum, Tabassum, Raya, Jerome, Ario, Arvin, Ali, Alana. When you guys actually read this now, do you feel like you kind of feel the ideas more? Do you feel like you feel the idea of articulation more? How it's so like methodical? No, but it's okay if you don't. You don't have to say, just be honest with me. And if you don't, then I will try again from a different perspective. And then I'll try again from a different perspective. Like, Taranum, Tabassum, what about it makes you feel like you actually grasp it more? What about it makes you feel that way? What about it makes you grasp it more? What about it makes you feel that way? Tell me. Guys, everybody, talk to me in chat. I've got a few. Um, yeah, okay, the more examples, the better. So let me keep giving you more examples. So let's do this. Let's do an example about front focus. So now, front focus wise, right? I want you guys from now on, place the most important new information at the start of the sentence. So, I might say, through the witches' riddles, Macbeth learns to distrust reality itself, right? And then you've got end focus. And what does that actually look like? You place the emotional or conceptual punch at the end. Place the emotional or conceptual punch at the end. And what does that look like? Macbeth clings to prophecy. Why? Because it disguises, his growing fears. And what about nominalization? Let's start using this more. So actually intentionally try to place information in different parts of a sentence on purpose, right? And Jerome says, can you interchange clarification and evidence? No. Clarification always comes after evidence. Evidence is just the proof. Clarification is like your explanation of the proof, right? That's just a misnomering. Does that make sense? And then with nominalization, you kind of think of it as, you know, you turn ideas abstract, right? And conceptual. Like so, you might say this self-deception, nominalization are words that end with "tion." Okay, so self-deception becomes the foundation. You see how important nominalization is here? Does that make sense? Foundation of his moral collapse. There we go. Does that make sense? So, Ario, does that, this is kind of like, let's make it tangible. Like, actually try and intentionally place things at the front, or place things at the end, or intentionally add "tion" at the end of certain words. That'll help. Does that make sense? Are we on the same page? So, the other thing I want to teach is idea hierarchy. Okay? So now you have your primary idea, then you have your secondary clarification, then you have your like micro example or quote, and then you have a meta layer of interpretation and perspective on the world, and then you connect it to the contention or prompt, right? If this order is scrambled, your writing will feel unclear and muddy. That is just the truth. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? Are we on the same page? All right, now you guys have two options. I can either correct your work throughout the week that you send to me on Discord, and you can use this time as Q&A, so you can ask me as many questions as you like, and I can just teach you what you guys want to learn. Or I can start a timer, you guys can write, and we can do spreadsheet like usual. And I'm going to start a poll. Ready? Okay. Here. Would you prefer, would you prefer um, writing, option one, writing now, or writing throughout the week? Option two. Save, save. And can you guys see my poll? Save to library. And okay, I've just launched a poll. Can you guys answer the poll? Would you prefer to write right now, send me work throughout the week? And I want to do this kind of I want to do this way because I want to give you guys an opportunity to ask me things because we've had some chop ups in terms of timings and classes. And another thing, guys, I'm putting on another class tomorrow at 7:30 as well. Sorry, not 7, yeah, 7:30, whatever. Join tomorrow at not even 7:30. Let's do like not let's do can you guys do like 5:30 tomorrow? 5:30 tomorrow? 5:30 p.m. tomorrow? It won't be same class. I just want to give you guys an opportunity to come, ask me more questions. Just an extra lesson to kind of make up for all the difficulties of the past, week or two with me.